Welcome to another All About Trauma Live with my friend Nicholas, and we have a very special guest. Her name is Stephanie. As we're waiting for YouTube to come on, I just want to invite everyone to this discussion where we're having a great discussion with Stephanie about motherhood and how it is so important since her and I are from the same country, Kenya, as a collectivist culture. It's so important for someone to have support when raising children and how important the great family union and marriage union is for our culture. So maybe you can touch up on that.
Hi, guys. I'm Stephanie, and I'm happy to be here with you guys today. I am a mother, I am a wife, I am a therapist, and I really enjoy being a mother. And the reason I enjoy being a mother, I think this is probably the best part of my life. And we have a saying in Kenya, and I think in Africa, that it takes a village to raise a child. And part of why I love being a mother is because I have a village. My family lives close and they're very supportive. My husband is such an amazing husband, amazing father. He is so available. And I think for us, like in a collectivist culture, we love that. We love having family around. We love having friends around. Our kids are passed on to many hands, and everyone is there like taking care of them, raising them, correcting them, and it takes so much of the burden off of motherhood. And I love that. I love that I can go to school because I go to school from Monday to Friday, and I have a 5 month old that I can live with my husband, and we are able to pay someone to also help take care of her. And my parents don't live so far away, so I'm able to take care, they're able to take care of my child so that he can go to school, so that he can go to work. And there's no part of my life I can say has stopped because of that. So yeah,
Mm,
I would really encourage people to, if you're a husband, be there for your wife, be there for your kids because they're your kids as well, they're not just her kids. If you are a mom, if you're a father, if you know any mothers, just ask them what they need, because motherhood can get very frustrating if you don't have that support system. So I really thank God for the one that I have.
wonderful. Thank you for sharing this with us. So very soon now we'll be hearing a little bit about your story, how you became a therapist. You're currently an active therapist in the city of Nairobi, if I understand well, Stephanie.
Yes.
You also do some extra work that has to do with taking care of women who have early pregnancies or might find themselves in difficult situations when going through that early unexpected pregnancy. We'll be talking a bit about that as well. So without further ado, Stephanie, if it's okay, we'd love to hear of your journey, of how you became the person that you are today, and then we'll come back online with you to have a bit of a Q&A and discover more about your culture and your thoughts. So take it away.
Okay, awesome. So like I said before, I have an amazing, very supportive, very kind family. My parents have really been there, since my childhood. They've really done their best to take care of me. And but the problem is, when I was a child, when I was about, let's say, from 5 and beyond, no, from 6 and beyond, I moved school, and then I started having trouble like finishing my homework. I was making careless mistakes at school. I was having difficulty focusing in school. And in Africa, okay, in many parts of Africa, education is so important. Like, they believe that formal education is what is going to make sure that you have a very good life in the future. So when my parents saw that I was starting to struggle in school, I was struggling with keeping up in school, because before I had been, I was topping the class and everything. So my parents thought that because I'm not able to focus in school, they should take me to a boarding school where there's more structure and I will be able to listen to the teachers more. I'll have more time to read so that I can do well and so that I can have a bright future. So when they took me to boarding school, it actually got worse in many ways. And the reason for that is I had undiagnosed ADHD. So I wasn't just not doing my homework because I didn't feel like, or I was lazy. I wasn't just not concentrating in class because, school is boring. Like, it was so hard for me to focus. It was a problem, a very big problem for me. And when I went to boarding school, like, everything everything became worse. All the symptoms, started showing even more clearly. I was struggling more. So maybe I could just go through the criteria of ADHD, what we use as therapists from the DSM-5 to diagnose ADHD, so that even as I continue talking about what I was going through in school, it can make sense. So one of the symptoms of ADHD is having difficulty paying close attention to details, and you make careless mistakes. Like, I can remember I grew up Catholic, and every Catholic knows that Mary is the mother of Jesus. But when we were doing Christian religion in school, I wrote that Martha was the mother of Jesus. And I didn't know that that's what I had written until later, when the teacher is beating us for getting what we got wrong. And he's like, how can you not know it was Mary? And even I was shocked that I made such a mistake. And that's just something that stuck with me. But I always made such careless mistakes at school. Another one is difficulty sustaining attention. Like, I would find myself daydreaming in class. So the teacher is teaching, teaching, teaching. And then when he asks me a question, I'm like, what did you say? And my desk mate is like trying to whisper the answer in my ear in a way that the teacher will not know, because if he knows I wasn't concentrating, then I'll get in trouble. Another one is you don't seem to listen when you're being spoken to, and you have difficulty organizing yourself. And that's been something that I have always struggled with. Like, my desk was always a mess. My book was always had like so many marks because I was trying to get everything right. I disliked tasks that required sustained attention. I often lost things, and I was easily distracted, and I was very forgetful. So take someone who's like this to boarding school, and everything just became worse. Like, I remember my first week of boarding school. The first day that I got there, we had night preps. So that's a time when everyone is in class, there's no teacher, and you're just supposed to be quiet and reading. And if you spoke, you'd be written on a noisemakers list, and then you would be beaten by the teacher who was in charge during that time. So all through the week, every single day of the week, I would always be on the noisemakers list, and I would always be beaten because of talking too much. Like, that's already another symptom of ADHD. So I was constantly just being criticized for not being able to like go bathe on time, not fetching my water on time. Everything that people were doing so normally was such a hard thing for me. I would always be blurting out answers before the question was finished. I was always interrupting people. I had difficulty waiting my turn, and obviously these made it very hard to be my friend, because people felt like I felt I was more important than everyone else. I'm the only one who has something to say. So I experienced social isolation. I am far away from my parents. I feel so abandoned, and it was just a difficult time for a child of 9 years old. To not have friends, to not have her parents around, to not have anyone to tuck her in and ask her, how was your day? To not have anyone to tell I had a bad dream, to not have anyone to tell I was being bullied, because boarding schools are an institution. No one cares about you. The adults don't care about you. They just want you to get the grades. And I can remember, like, when we would fail, like, after we did our exams, we used to be like 100 in a class. Okay, not well, in a stream, and then there were like 4 classes. So we were like, no, there were 2 classes actually. So we were 50-50 in each class. So when we would do our exams, anyone who had dropped a grade would be called in front of the whole school's assembly, and then we would be beaten so badly for failing, for dropping a grade. And if you had dropped so much, they would call you to the staff room where the teachers were, and you would lie down and have your feet up, and then they would beat the soles of your feet with a stick. And by the time they are done beating you so badly, you are crawling to class because you can't even walk. So that was basically my childhood. It was just fearing the teachers, fearing being beaten, lots of physical abuse for no reason, because who doesn't fail in life every so often? No one liked me. Everyone thought I was lazy, and I was, I was bad company, because I just couldn't keep up. Like the things that normal people do, I couldn't do them. My locker was always a mess. My desk was always a mess. My stuff was always a mess. I was very untidy. So and I didn't have anyone to tell like what I was going through. I remember there's a time that one of the teachers called me aside and she was like, Steph, I beat you so much because you're always making noise. And like you didn't even have to talk much. Like someone would just sneeze and you'd be like, oh, excuse you or bless you, and that would get you in the noisemakers list. Just so she was like, what's wrong? I'm trying to help you here, but I also don't know why I keep talking. I just can't stop. So it was a very, very difficult time for me. I used to lose things a lot also. I don't remember ever finishing a roll of tissue paper. Like I would always just finishing the ink in my pen. I would always lose the pen. So of course that really affected my self-esteem. I was like, why is everyone so organized? How is everyone able to keep their stuff safely? Why don't people steal from other people? It's just me. Why am I always losing my keys? So it really affected how how I saw life, and it doesn't help when you fail a grade. Okay, I thankfully was averagely smart. Like I wasn't topping the class, but I also wasn't like the last in the class. So I didn't get too much verbal abuse from the teachers, but for those people who did, or when I dropped a grade, when those of us dropped a grade, the teachers would become very verbally abusive. They'd be like, oh, your parents should have given birth to an avocado so that they can eat it. At least that would have been worth something. You're so useless. Why don't you get good grades? What is wrong with you? We keep teaching you. Like, it was just a lot. My childhood was just a lot. And when we would go home during the holidays, I'd tell my parents, I don't want to go back to that school. And they'd be like, why? It's such a good school. So and so's kids went there and they did so well. And again, the thing with a collectivist um, community is that parents make decisions together about what they're going to do with their kids. So the fact that other people's kids had gone to that school, then I had no excuse to say I don't want to go there anymore. Like it wasn't about me, it was about the school is good and the teachers are fine because they help you get good grades. So there was that. There was a lot of that. So I couldn't express why I didn't want to be there anymore. Of course, I also knew I was the problem because I wasn't tidy and no one liked me and all those things, and I didn't want to tell them that. But it was just quite difficult. And now you remove the fact that I have ADHD, and we get to something called boarding school syndrome that Dr. Joy Chavarin, I don't know if I said it correctly. I am so sorry if I didn't. But she talks about boarding school syndrome, which is something that a lot of kids and a lot of her clients, she's a psychoanalyst, a lot of her clients go through. And it's when you feel abandoned by your parents. She talks about the ABCD. So the first is abandonment. And when my parents left me, like I just saw their car leaving and I was like, what do you mean you're going? Like, what am I supposed to do with myself with these strangers? And I was there with the head teacher and she just called some girl to come and, help me show me where the dorms are. And I just felt so abandoned. I felt so scared. I felt like I was a bad person and this is why they were leaving me. Like, it's because I wasn't finishing my homework. Actually, later in life, my parents mentioned that, we took you to boarding school because you were not getting good grades and you were not finishing your homework. So we took you to a place with structure. And that confirmed subconsciously what I thought, that my parents left me there because I was bad. And that affected like me even into my adulthood. Like the kind of relationships that I was getting into were relationships where I felt I had to prove myself as good so that this person doesn't abandon me. There are people whose coping mechanism with that is to like leave you before you leave them. But for me, it's like working, constantly doing things to make sure that you don't leave me. But the unfortunate thing is that got me into a relationship with a narcissist, because no one loves taking and taking and taking more than a narcissistic person. So I got myself into the hands of a narcissist. I think I'll just talk about that later. Let me just continue dealing with the boarding school thing. So A is abandonment, B is bereavement. And that's the grief that you go through when you realize that you're stuck in a place with strangers and no one loves you. The people who love you have just left. And when you're homesick, you would cry for days and days and no one cares. And C is captivity, which is what boarding schools feel like. They feel like it's a prison. Again, I've told you how much we used to be beaten, like on the soles of our feet, to the extent that you're crawling to class. Like there was so much abuse going on there. But because our parents also grew up in such scenarios, or I'm guessing even worse, even when you told them, they wouldn't see it as a big deal. They'd be like, you know, your teachers just want you to get good grades, just don't drop. So the thing is, if I already had an A, like I can't go further than an A. And depending on circumstances and how hard the exam was, sometimes I'll get a B, but I will be beaten for the B. And the D is dissociation, which is when you finally accept that this is your life now, no one cares about you. And when you grow up, like I always had a hard time making friends, because I would always feel like, well, what if they leave me also? Like, so I was always 1 foot in, 1 foot out, in friendships, in relationships, because I was like, one day this person, okay, of course this would never happen in real life, but I guess my subconscious was reading it as, one day this person will just take me to a boarding school and leave me there with strangers and no one who cares about me. So I always felt that. I always felt so scared, and they affected me so much. Like there's so much trauma that I went through as a child because of not being there, not being with my parents. And it really spoke to the kind of person I became. So when I went to high school, one of our teacher of Swahili, had done psychology as his minor while he was learning at the university. And he would tell us so many interesting things about the human mind. And I was like, wow, when I finish school, I am definitely going to do psychology, because it will help me learn why I am weird, why I behave the way I behave, why I don't think the way other people think. And maybe I will be able to understand myself and I will be able to fix myself, because there's something wrong with me. So when I left high school, that's when I went to take psychology, and I loved it. I loved every class. Of course, I still had a hard time going to certain classes or finishing my assignments on time. Like the ADHD never just left because I was passionate about something. So it was quite difficult for me in school. But eventually I did finish, I did graduate. I do enjoy teaching, helping other people. And when I read through the criteria for ADHD, at first I was like, oh, I relate to a lot of that. But in Africa, you don't just embrace that you have a mental peculiarity, like, because it's just really frowned upon. So I was in denial for a very long time. But eventually I had to accept it. I had to accept this is who I am. And I went to see a psychiatrist, and he's helping me with treatment and everything. But the moment that I accepted that that was who I am, of course, I cried, I grieved the person that I wished I was. I wished I was a neurotypical person. I wished I was just like everyone else, but I'm not. and it's okay, and I have my own superpowers by being who I am. And I can say that, having ADHD, now that I look at it, has been a good thing to some extent, especially when I'm on hyper focus and I get to learn a lot or read a lot. So I'm very knowledgeable, which is something that really um, helps me socially. I'm also a very fun person to be around, very spontaneous. So yeah, it's worked out in some ways. It hasn't in other ways, but I am embracing every part of who I am. Yes. So yeah, maybe you can come back and tell me if you'd like to focus on something or ask any questions.
Wow, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I was very touched by your story of abandonment. Something really, sort of tightened up in me every time you mentioned that. And then the dissociation that comes with all the bullying and the captivity and the violence involved. Um, yeah, that was a very touching story. How are you feeling, Rene?
Yeah, I'm feeling what she's sharing, and I'm just able to really put in a couple of people who also could be going through the same. So it really gave the context of how the community is, especially when it comes to schooling. I didn't go to boarding school, but I almost went for almost the same reasons, that as a community, we usually find that when you're able to take your children to this institution and you're able to find order and this independence at a young age, because she got, I think you mentioned that you got to boarding school in high school. We know there's some people who actually have joined boarding school from grade 4, grade
No,
5
I
in
was nine
primary
years
school.
old. I was grade
9,
5.
wow, wow. So that really is, many of people, many individuals have actually started off boarding school from that such an age, such a very young age, in a very formative age. So it really helped me to also see the things that we go through and I see in this community in context. So thank you also for sharing that story. Thank you. Yes.
We saw some of the darker sides of collectivist culture in that sense. Um, it seems as if your parents were coming from the point of view like this group community pressure would help you become the better self that they were hoping you would become, but then it really worked against you because precisely because the culture would not allow for your peculiarity to be acknowledged. And in a sense, I'm reminded that a lot of collectivist cultures often play the shame emotion a lot more strongly than individualistic cultures. And it seems to come through a little bit your story. How do you relate to that shame?
Yes, shame is a big thing in our culture. You are shamed for not being like everyone else. You are shamed
Uh,
for everything. And I think, oh, especially like as a woman, like you are supposed to be organized, you're supposed to have your life in order, because how are you going to raise children, how are you going to take care of your husband in future if you are not organized, if you are not tidy, if you are not extremely clean? So I did feel a lot of shame because of that. And I think my healing, or part of my healing, came when I said, you know what? I don't care what anyone else thinks about me. And I will say it came from like watching a lot of Western, how Westerners live their life, like seeing individualistic cultures where people are like, you know what, it's my life, I'll live it my way. So I decided, you know what, I have tried and I have tried and I have tried to keep up with society, but I am not able to. So maybe I'm just in the wrong society, and I am just going to live how I see them living on the internet, without a care in the world, just embracing themselves, self-love. And the moment that, of course, my healing was from shame was like quite a process. But okay, let me also mention this. I was in a relationship with a narcissist. And okay, like he was a real narcissist. He wasn't like how anyone hurts you and you're like, oh, you're such a narcissist. No, that one, like actually fit the criteria. Like, he had this sense of over importance. And he, like, for example, when we were in a group and we were just discussing issues and he had a different opinion, and everyone was like, nah, this other thing works better, he'd be like, but I'm telling you this, like, this is the right way. Why don't you see what I am telling you is the right way? And he was like that even in our relationship. Like, I could never have an opinion on anything. I would apologize for giving an opinion that was different than his, especially in front of friends. Like, if we were in a group setting, he would be so furious with me, and we would leave that, and he would be like, how can you embarrass me like that? Why would you say that when I was saying a completely different thing? So he felt like his opinion was the opinion, it was the right thing. And he wanted, like, excess, he had this need for excessive admiration. So even when, like, he would do something and I would say, oh no, let's do it this way instead, correcting him, like, how dare I say he is not correct, say he is not perfect. And we would go like a week without him speaking to me and just being moody because I corrected him instead of admiring how amazing he was and how much he was trying at putting bathing the child the correct way, because we had a child together. We have a child together. He was very, very entitled. He felt that his opinion is the only one that mattered. His desires and his expectations are all that should happen in this relationship or with his friendships or at work, the stories that he would tell me. And then he had very superficial relationships, and he would take advantage of other people. Like, people were only good when they were earning him money or getting him a position or something. But then he would come home and tell me, oh, I really don't like, like Alex, for example. He's always this, he's always that. I can never work with him. And then he goes out to work with him because, he's getting money from Alex. So his friendships, his relationships were never really real. And there's a time I went through his phone. Sorry?
This kind of transactional or instrumental way of relating to others always.
Yes, exactly. And there's a time, like, I didn't actually go through his phone. We were sharing a phone because he lost his phone and he didn't have a smartphone. So I was like, you can get on WhatsApp with my phone because you have a job that you need to keep up with. So that one day I was just chatting with my friends on WhatsApp. And then I see a text where he was saying, Steph just likes keeping money for herself. Steph isn't telling me about her money. And that time I was telling him everything. I was telling him, like, this is how much I'm earning. I had to leave a year of school when I got pregnant, because I got pregnant in my third year of school. So I left for a year, and then when I was working, I told him, okay, so I got this job, let me work so that I can save up money for my school fees and go back to school next year. And he was like, nah. So now he asks his friend for money, which is what I saw in the text. And then the friend is like, but Steph has a job. Why aren't you guys okay? And then he's like, Steph isn't telling me about her money. Steph doesn't tell me anything. She's not being generous. I don't know what she's at. I'm like, and I was so confused. I was like, but we had this conversation, and it would happen so much that we would have one conversation and then he would act like it never happened. I'm just doing my own thing. So there was a lot of gaslighting, a lot of, triangling. I was always just in a state of limbo. There was also a lot of lack of
characteristics for me, and my understanding is the narcissist is always the eternal victim, right? They're always situation.
Yes, he is always the eternal victim. And then he never had, empathy for me. Like, when we are going through an issue and I would be like, okay, so this happened and I didn't like it. This is how I felt, because I am someone who really believes in, self-improvement, doing my best in relationships. Of course, I also had that people-pleasing thing of, trying to make sure I'm not abandoned. So I was really working hard in the relationship. So even when I would approach something, I would approach it very respectfully. I would walk on eggshells while mentioning it, but I would always end up being the one who was wrong and being the one who had to apologize to him, because he was fine. And whatever I am going through is my own doing, because, he wouldn't have done whatever he did if I hadn't done ABC.
Right.
So
again, and also another characteristic of narcissism is this very, very fragile ego, right? They get wounded very easily.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah,
other
for
one
sure. And,
we
mhm.
learned there is also this sense that they have the ability to undermine your persona
Mhm.
when, especially when you're in public, right? They take over the image that you project in the public, and they manipulate that image in their favor. So that also
Yes.
seems to be the case here. Listen,
Yeah.
before you give us a full account of this sort of narcissistic relationship you had, I'm interested in a couple of things. One is your thoughts about how we use the word narcissism today in the world, and whether you want to warn us or not about
Mhm.
its use. And then the other one is this beautiful link that you made between feeling abandoned and then working very, very hard, and how that fitted with the narcissistic sort of desire, almost as if two pieces of the puzzle kind of match to one another. I think we should expand a little bit more on that link,
Mm.
and probably talk about some of the unconscious ways in which earlier maladaptations then move into our intimate personal relationships, and how we can get caught into further difficult relationships out of our own doing, in essence, because by then you were an adult, you were able to
Yeah.
choose who to be with, but it took you to step into that relationship before you realize what was going on. I would love you to expand a bit more on that, so these two subjects.
Mhm. Okay. So could you like tell me again the things that you would like
Yeah,
me to speak about?
yeah. So the first one is what are your thoughts around our use of the word narcissism today?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I think that we are definitely overusing the word narcissist. So just because someone doesn't do, what you want them to do, or they don't fit into the kind of person you want them to be, doesn't make them a narcissist.
Right.
um you can have disagreements with someone, you can have different opinions from someone. I think a lot of times when people say, he's such a narcissist, it's because they don't want to bend to your will, or they don't want to
Mm,
change themselves for
Right.
you.
mm,
And it's very unfortunate because there's someone, I am someone who believes there's someone in the world for everyone. And just because you met someone who is very uncomfortable, changing themselves to fit a relationship that you're in, it doesn't make them a bad person, or
Right.
just because someone portrays some of the things that I've mentioned, that doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist either. It could just be bad behavior. Maybe they just grew up in a place where some of these things were normal, where you had to defend yourself, or you couldn't say sorry because it showed you were weak. I think in Africa, there's also a lot of that, especially the men. Hey, Rene, I hope you're not like that. So, yeah, like
General,
the
you were telling that
sorry?
as you were telling your story without me having a fuller picture, you were like kind of quartered through, half through your story. And I was thinking, well, a lot of men have a difficult time and feel very hurt when their woman does not recognize their knowledge, or makes them feel wrong, or so that's a very common universal among us. We have a sense that we need to know the world, we need to be capable
Yeah.
of understanding else, and to be able to fit in a box.
Mhm.
That's sort of the archetypal we as men tend to play. And so when a woman, and we can feel quite hurt quite universally without being
Mhm.
narcissist about. In fact, I would say I'm a little what would you say, generally speaking, I'm a little hurt by how easily women can undermine this need that we have to feel in control of knowledge, to feel in control of a theoretical understanding of life, and call that narcissism, or call them, yeah, essentially call that narcissism. I mean, we have profound archetypal needs as well, and sometimes
Yeah.
women can easily undermine that, particularly in the sphere of those who identify with more the feminist agenda, and so on and so on. But Um, yeah.
Mhm.
So coming back to what you're saying, I like that. I like that insight, that it's not because you're not fitting in a particular relationship that you end up being a narcissist. You need to see a pattern there. And I think you're mentioning about the friends, right? Like the fact that you would
Yeah.
see him having these very superficial friendships. That's really a red flag then, because
Mhm.
then it's a pattern across many relationships that you're seeing, not just yours. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. It's really important to like not just the way you're saying, like you can't draw it from how they relate with just you. Maybe, and maybe they just grew up, thinking that women should be treated like this or men should be treated like this by how they saw their parents relate or by how the media portrays it or music portrays it. But that doesn't necessarily make them a narcissist. You have to see how they are. You have to know how they are at work. You have to know how they are with their friends so that you can be, and obviously like it takes a therapist to diagnose someone of narcissistic personality disorder. Like even me as a therapist, I can't just go to him and tell him I diagnose you with NPD. It has to be like he goes to like I can see the criteria, so I know what I'm dealing with because I've lived with it. But he can't take that and say now this is my diagnosis because my ex said that. Like it's a whole thing.
And even as a therapist, you're going to
Mhm.
be very careful, right? In our jobs, we don't meet somebody and after 1 or 2 sessions, we diagnose them with narcissism. It's like it really takes a whole work of
Yeah.
differentiating the different difficulties they're having to then be able to convey that diagnosis. So,
Mhm.
uh, and usually we meet it with compassion and empathy anyway, right? So we don't make the narcissist the devil, or the sort of, we don't demonize this
Yeah.
particular diagnosis, because it also is caused by trauma.
Mm-hmm. For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the other question was about this sort of link that you made between the initial sense of abandonment
Mm-hmm.
that you got, and this initial sense that you were abandoned because you were not good enough, you were bad, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because you performing well at school, and how that leads you to choose the kind of person that you chose. I really want to explore this side of like falling into an intimate relationship that mirrors earlier patterns
Mm-hmm.
of hurting. What would you
Yeah.
say? Mm.
I'd say that for a lot of people, there's a very clear, you know, pattern. Because like after I was abandoned by being taken to boarding school, and I was put in a social situation where that was very negative. So there's a lot of negativity that I got. I grew up knowing, like, even the friends I chose, like I remember one of the friends I had in at the university was so verbally abusive. She was so mean. She would say negative things about me behind my back. But I felt that, that's how people are, so I have to tolerate them because that's the thing that I saw as a child. So and people would like tell me, like my roommate would tell me, why are you friends with that girl? She's so mean to you. And I'm like, oh, she just needs a little love and she'll change because love changes people. But of course, it never really changed her. So even the relationships that I would choose, like I remember there's a time I was in a relationship with a really nice guy called Brian, and he was kind, he was generous, he would speak to me very well and take care of me, and I really was uncomfortable in that relationship. I labeled him as clingy. I don't remember what other words I used, but it was
Or
very uncomfortable for me. Yeah.
boring.
Boring. Oh my gosh, he was such a boring person. So he was just not the norm. He was not what I was used to. And okay, unfortunately, I also had a friend who was dating men who are like that. So I thought, who are bad, like, mean and verbally abusive. So I thought, that's how men are. They should be out there. I thought it was being aggressive and being masculine and taking up your space. So that's basically what I thought, and those are the kinds of relationships that I usually. So I ended up breaking up with Brian. By the way, he was too boring. He was too. But actually, I feel like in that relationship, I'm the one who like kind of maybe abused him a little. I wouldn't like use the whole word abuse, but I wouldn't pick his calls, and I'd roll my eyes when he was talking. Like it was just small things like those. I feel like I was not a good girlfriend to him. I was not a good person, and he deserved better. So anyway, I left him and I went back. Now that's when I met with the narcissist who, who always kept me on my toes because, I'm not enough. He was making me feel the way I was used to as a child. I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. Something bad will happen to me. I will be left if I am not constantly trying to do my best. So it was just a cycle that helped me, keep going because, I had a dysfunctional way of looking at things. But I think what broke the cycle for me was the day that I was genuinely trying to solve an issue with him. And he said, "Oh, I don't want to solve that. I want you to feel pain. I want you to feel bad." And I was like, but in a relationship, like two people are definitely going to hurt each other every so often. And we need to be ready to come to the table, to discuss things, to see how we can move forward, making sure the other person isn't feeling hurt all the time. And he was like, "Nah, I don't want to do that. I want to hurt you. I want to do what you did to me, make you feel how I felt." And that's when it hit me that I don't think I'm dealing with a normal person. I really don't think this is normal. And I remember that night I called him a psychopath because I didn't know the wording narcissist, but the lack of empathy for me was just weird. The preoccupation with revenge and with hurting people who've hurt, I was like, this is not normal. So I called him a psychopath. And I just went to sleep. I was like, you know what? I am never going to try to solve anything because clearly I am not dealing with a normal person. Of course, the next morning I woke up and apologized, as would happen in a relationship every time I said something that would hurt me. But it was at that moment that I realized that there are people who are not okay. Let me just use the phrase loosely, there are bad people in this world. Like, that just because you are a good, kind person, just because you are doing your best to make a relationship work, doesn't mean that person will come aboard this cycle with you to try make the relationship work. There is a time when you have to step back and accept that not everyone is good. And even when I went home, like I looked at the relationships that I had, like with my family, with those we lived with, those who lived around us, and I started seeing, wait a minute, this person, like I've always been trying to work so hard, and this person has never even, they just give me crumbs every so often to keep me coming back, crumbs of affection. And that was when I realized I can't be the one working in relationships anymore. And I cut off from everybody, and then now I came to a place where I started testing like people to see who was good for me and who was not, and being okay if you leave me, because if you leave me, you're not good for me. And I think that's when the sense of abandonment started to fade away, because I became the one who's deciding which relationship will stay and which one will go.
Which in a way is to not abandon you, right? Oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
we become our own perpetrators because we enact the things that the models of behaviors and relationships that have been projected onto us by the authorities when we were young.
Mm-hmm.
Then we introject and inherit those behaviors and we do them on ourselves. So oftentimes, at least in my work, I don't know with you, Stephanie, but I often have to bring my clients to recognize that they are the first perpetrators of their own lives, more than the
Yeah.
people that they point their fingers to. Because, of course, we have a much more immediate relationship to ourselves, right? Like we are in, our thoughts are literally a split second away from other thoughts in our minds, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and so if I have the thought, I'm not enough, I don't need to wait for somebody to point that out. I'm already in that state of I'm not enough, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm vulnerable to somebody telling me that, but I've already intervened within my mind to believe that I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Somebody puts the finger to me and says, you're not enough. And the thought, you're not enough, in my mind has come up, and I've met it with compassion and said, I hear you, but this is not me. You can sit by my side here, but I'm not going to identify with you. The person outside of you pointing the finger and saying you're not enough, you can do the same. You can say,
Yeah.
I can hear you, but I'm not going to identify with what you're saying, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the power of ourselves to relate to a particular inner thought then gets transmuted in how we relate to the thoughts of other people.
Yeah.
In this sense, we become our own perpetrators. And what I hear from you is that something was very much normalized, and even like the abnormal element was Ryan, right, in that story, and the narcissistic
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
normal element, until something happens, until you're able to see what you have normalized. What took you out of that sort of worldview about yourself and others? What allowed you to see that potentially a Ryan kind of person was going to be better for you than this other person you described?
Yeah, I think that specific night when he said he's not interested in solving issues, that's when I realized I deserve a person like me. I deserve a person who is
Uh,
willing to solve issues, you know? I deserve, and that's actually okay. So in Africa, like I don't like really believe it, but there's this fear of witchcraft. So like someone will go to a witch doctor, and then they will say your name and give some money, and some witchcraft will be done, and then something bad will happen to you. So like from that point, like I started asking myself, is witchcraft real? Maybe Brian was so hurt by what I did, and he went to say my name somewhere, and guess what? And that's why I'm experiencing all these horrible things, you know. But anyway, it's just the meaning of karma. It's basically like karma. But of
mm,
course, Brian didn't, because he's an amazing person, and it wouldn't even work if if anyone tried. But that was the point at which I decided, you know what, I deserve someone like me, and I'm a very spiritual person. So I deal with things like spiritually before I do them physically. So like I changed my mindset, and even the prayers I would make, I was like, God, just get me out of this situation. I am done trying to fix it. I am done trying to pray for this person, trying to fast for this person. I deserve better, and I want better. So like eventually when that relationship ended, I was very intentional about getting people who are good for me. Of course, like that's when I met my husband shortly after, the man who's now my husband. And he was so amazing, but he also started becoming boring and clingy because I hadn't healed completely. But every time that, so every time that he'd call me, I'd feel like, "Ah, why is he calling me?" So I would want to break up with him because it was just so different from my norm. But something in me would just tell me, like, don't break up with him. Like, you have to get used to being loved. So I think that's where my spirituality kind of played a part, that I just felt how to do the right thing, and how to do what's finally good for me now that I had decided to do what's good for me.
I think that,
nice.
and I think what you're saying is so profound, in that maybe I think we're about to share a project that you're part of, whereby you're sharing the same for other young girls who might have gone through a similar experience, or someone. So that's one thing I want to share. But also remembering, and as you're telling this story, I'm also reflecting how this society that we live in. When you talked about you're getting beaten, I've just realized, and right now, that this is not something that's normal.
Yeah.
When we have talked about corporal punishment before, you and I, Nicholas, and how she's mentioned it so many times, like it has happened so many times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost normal that there's the shame and also the physical punishment. You're brought forward. And I immediately had that image that these things that happen, you're brought forward in front of your, I think, 100 students or more,
Mm-hmm.
the whole stream, that this is the person who's not performing well, this is the person who's not up to par, and we shall punish them publicly, and also punish them somehow publicly in front of the other supervisors, the other teachers in the staff room, in a very almost degrading way, having your legs up for a child and hit there so that you can't even walk. You're saying crawl crawl back to your classroom. So it really helped me understand the context of how this corporal punishment and the dynamic of power in these very conservative cultures, as you were saying, that hopefully I don't have the same, I actually don't, whereby it's very not just patriarchal, but the dynamics of power is so clear cut that there's the teacher who is very high above, and their say is the final say. Whatever happens, whether they want to abuse you, whether they want to physically enact some punishment on you, even I think also this could have happened even in the relationships. Did you feel that because of the situation and institution that we are in, the dynamic of power in the relationship is somehow expected that the man will be dominating and even get to a point of even enacting physical dominance?
Yes, yes. Oh my goodness. Yes, you have hit the nail on the head. Actually, part of why I was gaslighting myself into staying in that relationship for so long was because, oh, well, he's the man, he's right, and I shouldn't have corrected him in front of people, and I talk too much, and I shouldn't have an opinion. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that. Yeah, you're right. And I think
If we,
it's why a lot of people stay in those bad relationships. We are taught that men, especially, I'm so sorry, I am a Christian, but I'm so sorry, but in the Christian context especially, there's that whole thing of, your husband knows what is right, you should follow your, okay, like I saw even, I'm sorry, I don't know if I should mention this here, but I saw a post on Instagram where someone was saying, it was a preacher who was saying women should vote how their husbands say because their husbands are the head of the home. No, that was in accordance with the American, elections that are happening. I was like, what? So yeah, there's a lot of that, like in the Christian context, that doesn't actually follow, the biblical way of seeing things of husbands should die to their wives, and wives should respect their husbands. There are people who really take that out of context in the Christian church, which I am in, and there are people who in the African culture there's a lot of dominance. Men should dominate women. So that I used that as how to gaslight myself. And even with the ladies that I work with, because as you guys mentioned, I work with teens who get pregnant and are in crisis. So we take them into a safe house, we take care of them, we give them skills that when they leave, they'll be able to take care of their kids financially. And one of the things that is really important to us is to help them realize that men are good, men are amazing, we love men, but you do not need to stay in a relationship with a man who is using you, who is abusing you, who is making you do things that you are not yet ready for. And you don't have, when you leave for home, you don't have to go back to that setting, because there's also how we've been made to feel like we need a man for our lives to be okay. So they have a lot of that. They need to, we really encourage them to be more spiritual, as opposed to expecting a man to take care of everything. Like they can depend on God instead to take care of them, and they can focus on being the best people they are for their kids. Yeah.
I know we have a video that we can share from your work, Stephanie. So if you don't mind us showing that, I think our viewers would really enjoy.
Okay.
Crisis Pregnancy Ministry is a ministry of Youth for Christ Kenya that promotes the sanctity of human life, advocates for sexual purity among Kenyan youth, and helps the youth deal positively with their sexuality. To achieve our purpose, we offer the following: counseling, discipleship, and learning of life skills. There's an increasing number of teenage girls getting pregnant and being rejected by their families and community at large. Some have been raped by their family members, leading them to social vices like prostitution, drug abuse, abortion, and early marriages. To effectively rehabilitate these girls, CPMK intends to build a safe house to accommodate them for a period of time, thereafter reintegrate them back to the society.
We deal with ladies who have been into crisis, and through devotions and Bible studies with the ladies, we help them to know that there is hope for the future. You know, they come here with crisis and they know they have issues, but now we show them that there is hope in Christ and that He can show them and give them another chance for them in their life.
With your support, we are going to be able to buy more materials.
We would like to thank Foundation for the Nations for selecting our project, and we trust God that through this funding, we'll be able to secure the lives of the young girls and their babies. My name is Monica Katale, the project lead and coordinator, Crisis Pregnancy Ministries, Kenya.
Yeah, beautiful. So I don't know if everybody could hear clearly. The sound was a little soft on my side of things. So tell us a little bit more, Stephanie, about this.
So this is a safe house that we have, where when we meet teens who have been raped by their family members or by someone in their community and they've been kicked out, we have a lot of a lot of these teens who've been kicked out by their families. They're like, oh, you got pregnant, you can't be here anymore, because they come from very poor backgrounds where their own parents are struggling. And actually, how most of them get pregnant is because their parents are struggling, they're not able to pay fees, they can barely afford food for the family. Usually a man comes along, maybe a motorbike driver, and he's like, oh, I can take care of you. And he starts, sending money and giving money for sanitary towels, and they use that. They give them for quite a while, and then all of a sudden the man is like, okay, now you have to pay me. And obviously the girl doesn't have any money. So this man takes the girl and, pays himself with her body. And that's usually how most of them, get pregnant, because they need things their families cannot afford them. There are men who are willing to take advantage of that situation. So by the time, she's getting pregnant and she's coming back home, her parents don't want to see her. She's just adding another mouth to be fed. So these are the kind of girls that we take in. We help them. They feel very distraught, very depressed by the time that they meet us. And we counsel them, we provide food, we pay for their clinic services when they go to the hospital, for the kids when they come back, when the babies are born, we pay for everything that they need. And we also, when we can, we usually find donors to pay for their education, the girl's education, so that she can be able to go finish high school if she didn't finish, and maybe even go to the university. And we take care, we do our best to take care of them in every way we can. We teach them how to make mats, we teach them tailoring, we teach them cooking, so that by the time they're leaving, at least they have skills that they can help provide for their kids with. And we also do home visits, like even after they leave, we have packages that we usually take to them, and we counsel them, just see how they're integrating into society, because we want to make a difference in their lives. We want to make sure that the baby is okay and they are okay.
Fantastic. And I think for me, Stephanie, maybe as a parting shot, because you don't have much of your time left, they mentioned at the end of the video hope, and we have talked about hope before in this trauma lives with other guests. How would you say is the message of hope, or your message of hope, from your story, from the story of someone who is also getting to diagnosed with ADHD, and the stigma that has in this society, even as we're trying to progress to be more accommodating, because there are so many other cases out there. So
Yeah.
what message of hope do you have to share from your own story?
My message of hope would be that there is purpose in pain. Everything that I have gone through has enabled me to help other people who are going through the same thing, and in ways to even prevent people from experiencing the same thing. I have offered so much help, so much support to girls who find themselves pregnant and don't know what to do, girls who were not able to go back to school because of their pregnancy, just by virtue of my own story, that I had to leave school, but I was able to go back. I was able to finish. I was able to graduate, even though I have a child. I just give you hope that there are good people in this world. There are people who are willing to help you, people who are willing to support you, and just open your heart, even though you've been hurt, even though that heart has so many scars. Just open a little bit of it. Test the people around you. See if you can find any good people and start enjoying being loved. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. So on this very touching note, I think we have to close our lives today. We might hope to have you again on this live in some time from now, maybe with more insights about your life, your culture, and so on. But for today, we want to thank you profusely for joining us and sharing with us all your story, your journey of both pain and healing, and how you've come to reconcile this aspect of community as well, whereby there's a big portion of your story that shows the group as a source of pain, and but then also the group now has become a real source of healing for you. So with the choices that you've encouraged everyone to make today, I think we indeed have hope and look forward to these things. Rene, do you have a last word that you would like to share with Stephanie?
Absolutely. I would just say thank you for coming on and sharing with the audience how you have experienced these experiences and in this culture. And I think we have been able to touch on any other people who have come from maybe a similar background of getting to feel that sense of abandonment at a young age, and they get to know better as they grow and allow themselves to accept the love that they feel they deserve, even during that process. So, thank you again. I really feel that many people from our background, and maybe even from Nicholas's background, from whether a collective or maybe a more Western culture, can be able to understand and actually get to connect with the insights you're able to share. So thank you again.
Yeah.
Asante.
Before we leave, Stephanie, how people who might, so you have a private practice, or do you receive private clients? And
Yes.
if so, how can people contact you?
Yes, I have a private practice. So I'll give my email address here and then they can contact me there. So my email address is Stephanie Mukururi at gmail.com. So that's Stephanie Mukururi at gmail.com. And we can go
Okay.
from there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So until next time, Stephanie Mukururi, thank you for coming, and bye-bye. Take care.
Bye bye. Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.